Good afternoon, muchachos. Happy Friday, November 10th. You can see the agenda for today. Be reminded that if you've not checked in with me yet this week, I do need you to check in so you could take the link that's posted between 12:10 and 12:55 today. I'm going to cover document G with you from the DBQs that we've been working on this week. And then when we are done with that, you have a couple of things left to do. The Unit 2 exam will be open. You have until Wednesday next week to complete that. So that's 6 days between today and next Wednesday to complete that. You can determine when it is best for you to take that exam. So if you want to study beforehand, study for a couple of days and take it, fine. If you're ready to go, just, raring at the seams, ready to take care of business, then you can obviously fire that up today. That link is in Schoology. It'll take you to a Schoology assessment. It'll be questions based on everything that we've talked about, beginning with, our first little foyer into what federalism is, the Constitution, Supreme Court cases, campaign finance, all the way through the Electoral College. You also have an election survey / pretest to take, and you need to do this by Monday next week, Monday the 13th. Now, this is based on completion and participation. I'm not grading this for a score. I am trying to figure out where you guys are in your understanding of politics and elections. So this is kind of just a baseline thing for me, so I can figure out how to plan this unit best as we end trimester 1. So I need that completed by Monday at noon, so I can figure out the rest of the unit here for the remaining. I think we got like 6 class sessions left before the end of the trimester. So test by Wednesday, survey by Monday, and let's get to it. So let's discuss document G from the DBQs. Document G, if I'm not mistaken, should have given you a couple of historic elections that were exceptionally close in U.S. history. I think the questions are pretty straightforward here and do not require a whole lot of elaboration. Number one, what generalization can you make about these four presidential elections? Well, they were close. And in one of them, we had a plurality. Well, actually, yeah, that's correct. In one of them, we had a plurality. You could also have said in your answers that in these 4 elections, the person who became president didn't win the popular vote. Right? Adams didn't win the popular vote. Hayes didn't win the popular vote. Harrison did not win the popular vote, and G. Dub did not win the popular vote. The Electoral College decided the election as it always has, but the person who won the Electoral College did not win the popular vote. These are very close elections. One of the elections had a plurality. The person who won the popular vote didn't win the Electoral College. I mean, all those answers would have been fine. Question number 2, from your knowledge of how the Electoral College system works, what government body finally elected John Quincy Adams president in 1824? Well, it's the House, and we're going to come back to this question. And then number 3, explain how it's possible for a candidate like Hayes to lose the popular vote and win the election. Well, you already talked about that. Winning the popular vote does not guarantee that you're going to be president. You have to win a certain number of states. You have to have a certain number of electoral votes. Well, let's go and talk about these 2 elections. We're going to talk about the election of 1824, and we're going to talk about the election of 1876. Now, here's the thing about 1824. 1824, no one gets a majority of the Electoral College at this point in time, right? We didn't have 50 states, so the majority number for the Electoral College was 131 electoral votes. No one gets it. This is a plurality. All right. A plurality is when there are multiple people, none of which have a majority. John Adams wins 113,000 plus votes. John Quincy Adams wins 113,000 plus votes. Andrew Jackson wins 151,000 plus votes. And Andrew Jackson even wins more electoral votes than John Quincy Adams. So how is it that John Quincy Adams becomes president when he loses both the popular vote and has the least amount, not the least, but the second most amount of electoral votes? Well, you guys know that the House of Representatives determines who the president is if no one wins a majority. Here's the thing. Because Henry Clay was not a top 3 electoral vote getter, he has to drop out of this race. He doesn't drop out of the race. The House has then 3 people to choose from, the top 3 electoral vote getters. So that's Jackson, Adams, and Crawford. Henry Clay hated Andrew Jackson, and Henry Clay more or less campaigned in the House of Representatives to throw all the support behind John Quincy Adams to become president. And this is how he becomes president. It's basically through political dealings. Andrew Jackson was kind of a rough around the edges type character who really didn't mince words and spoke his mind. And a lot of times that upset people. But here's the problem with the Electoral College going to the House of Representatives if there's no majority vote. The House of Representatives can do as they please when it comes to voting for a candidate. They do not have to vote the way of their constituents. Any one of these representatives that came from a state that supported Andrew Jackson in 1824, they don't have to vote for him. And connecting to yesterday's conversation, what could potentially happen? How would the American public feel if the House of Representatives determined who the president was? They would be upset, and I can guarantee you people were not happy about this, which is why in 1828 Andrew Jackson becomes president. John Quincy is a one-termer. It would not go over very well. Let's go up to the 1876 election, because this is also an important one. Okay. Now, the number to be president in 1876 is 185. So actually, Rutherford B. Hayes does win the Electoral College. He does have the requisite number for a majority, right? Yes, he did not win the popular vote, but we know that doesn't matter. But here's what the document doesn't tell you about the 1876 election. There were 3 southern states in which the electoral votes, the popular vote and the electoral votes, were called into question. There was a highly probable chance that something fraudulent happened in that election. And why this wasn't contested and why Hayes ultimately became president as a Republican is because the Democrats from the South, right, in Congress, both in the Senate and in the United States House of Representatives, more or less made a deal with Republicans. And that deal was the Democrats would support Rutherford B. Hayes being president in 1876 if the Republican Party promised to remove the federal troops from the South. 1876, this is about 10 years after the end of the Civil War. This is during Reconstruction, where the North was more or less trying to implement an equitable society in the South after the end of slavery. Southerners didn't like that. So they agreed that they would support Hayes being president, and they would not challenge the results of the election, and they would let it more or less sit the way it stood if the North agreed to remove the federal troops from the South that were more or less imposing Reconstruction and desegregation. And at this point in time, in 1876, this is when Reconstruction ends, and this is when we're going to start to see the development of Jim Crow come into the American South society, where we're going to have pretty staunch segregation between blacks and whites. That's going to last all the way through, well, you could argue at least the 1950s, but undoubtedly up until the 1970s. And some would even argue all the way up into today. And again, this is one of the flaws of the Electoral College. If there isn't a clear majority winner in the Electoral College, the House of Representatives gets to decide who the president is. And that decision doesn't necessarily have to reflect the voice of the people. A lot of times, in these 2 examples right here, a lot of times that voice is reflective of political dealings, political desires, political wants and wishes that individual representatives have in the United States House of Representatives. I'm done chatting today, ladies and gentlemen. I will look at your document G answers today while you guys are in between people checking in. Remember, you have a test to take today. You have a test that you can take today. You have until Wednesday next week to complete that exam. And then you have a survey / pretest to take on the 2024 election that I need by Monday so I can appropriately plan our next unit. I'm all done. You guys have a great day. If you have any questions, be sure to reach out, check in on come into the link, the Zoom link rather. Drop me an email, whatever. But again, test by Wednesday, survey by Monday. You guys have a great weekend. I'll see you next week. Go Spartans.